Encounters have been exploring reports of a UFO crash in Long Island, New York, that have the community there deeply divided.
Investigating this sighting has been a study in sharp contrast. On the one hand, no one in an official capacity will confirm anything ever happened. Yet sincere, credible people in that area swear that a UFO crashed in their local park.
I know that I saw night turn into daylight, so whatever it was very large and very strong, and nothing I'd ever experienced before.
The police officer was describing to his desk sergeant that there was a trail of trees and telephone poles. He said that were all 8 to 10 feet high. He said, and there was a path going into the woods. That's why he thought perhaps something had crashed into the woods.
Suffolk County police officer had come into the building, asked him to use a payphone, and he also seemed upset. He just said that there was some kind of UFO or something that flew over West Babylon and had headed east and crashed in Southaven Park.
All of a sudden, the road was blocked off. I've never seen the fire department really block the road that heavily, and especially it was a strange time at night. And the other part that was curious was that there were no sirens going.
It was going on for like 3 nights in a row. The helicopters and searchlights looking in the park. Something, I don't know what, crashed in Southaven that night.
Our investigation began when we saw this videotape leaked by a government defense subcontractor who claimed it was shot at the site of the crash.
I managed to get some fairly impressive video, what I firmly believe to be a downed extraterrestrial object.
One of the first to publicize the alleged crash was South Shore press editor Rich King.
One of the most important facts, especially in a story like this, is to find something on an official level that doesn't make a lot of sense. We've been doing the paper here for 10 years, and we know the patterns within the community. We know when the park opens, when it closes. And we did find out that, indeed, the county had closed the park for 4 to 5 days during that period in November. And that is atypical of the county to do that. In developing the information further, what we could ascertain was apparently the Brookhaven laboratory ended up responding to the call rather than a local community service. So suddenly this had the earmarks of something federal as opposed to local.
Eyewitnesses say that the entrances to this park were closed shortly after the crash. They say they were stopped by roadblocks and they saw fire engines. But according to park officials and the Long Island Fire Department, it never happened. I had a chance to speak with Southaven Park Superintendent Bud Corwin, who's been living on site in the park for more than 20 years. There's speculation that a crash happened here in this park, November 24th, 7 o'clock. Do you know anything about it?
Not a thing, not a thing. In fact, of course, very shortly after that, we were asked if we knew anything about it, or people could come in and look, because there's a group that looks for UFOs and objects like this. And no, in fact, I know this park like the back of my hand. I've been on it all my life. But we have park police. And the park police patrol it all the time. And if they had seen or heard anything, I'd know it within 2 minutes.
His story was corroborated by the Chief Operating Officer of Suffolk County's Fire Rescue Department, Miles Quinn.
There was no fire alarms, active fire alarms dispatched at that time. Possibly a fire truck might have been out for a driver training lesson or something like that, and they would use a park facility to practice with a new driver. But other than that, I wouldn't have an explanation for why there would be fire apparatus in the area.
In search of an answer, I spoke with aviation specialist and former member of the Army Special Forces, Chuck DeCaro.
You ask yourself, what else is in the neighborhood? Well, Grumman is in the neighborhood, and they build airplanes. The PA-6B, for instance, has electronic warfare systems. You don't want it to fall in the wrong hands. If one of these pods had fallen off, that would explain why the government would try to secure the area and get the pod.
But a group of local residents aren't buying this explanation. John Ford, president of the Long Island UFO Network, spoke to Encounters about the crash that never happened.
Our organization has investigated over 600 UFO-related phenomenon incidents in the New York metropolitan area, with reports coming in as far away as Red China. On the night of November 24th, I myself, who lived 3 miles from Southaven Park,
lost my electric power and cable TV, while large military helicopters were overflying the area. I drove down in my pickup truck towards the area of Yaphank area and observed a raging forest fire deep in the woods and observed some sort of roadblock. These men were driving military vehicles that had no markings. They were dressed in paramilitary uniforms, black jumpsuits with green fatigue shirts underneath. 5 New York State police cars arrived at that location and were turned back by these men in black.
But if the crash did occur, there would have to be a federal record of the incident. Larry Bryant, public affairs writer for the Defense Department, was brought in to investigate the case.
Well, I have recently asked the Federal Bureau of Investigation under a Freedom of Information request to provide all records generated in response to such an incident in Long Island. The reply came back negative.
It was here, in this remote corner of Southaven Park, that the alleged crash happened. Independent field investigations conducted by teams from the Long Island UFO Network resulted in what they claim is definitive proof of the UFO crash. Amazingly enough, they discerned that the magnetic fields on the fence posts surrounding the park were reversed, a phenomenon corroborated by electrical engineer Preston Nichols.
It would have to be some artificial activity around the post to change the magnetic field. This wouldn't happen by itself. This is not a natural, normal occurrence. Something happened to cause this.
Oddly enough, further analysis determined that the trees at the alleged crash site were themselves magnetized.
That would have to be a tremendous magnetic field to do that, to magnetize a tree. So I've never heard of it anywhere else.
And while searching the park, schoolteacher Brian Levins discovered 2 important pieces of evidence.
I was part of that first investigation. We found a fire cone, a yellow fire tape, "Do Not Cross" letters on it, which was interesting because they told us they were not in the park for the last 10 years. But what was most amazing of all was we actually found a radiation suit adjacent to the railroad tracks. This we found very puzzling because we know that people from Brookhaven National Laboratory wear suits similar to this, and we have witnesses that people with white radiation suits were actually in the park that night.
But the fire chief of Brookhaven Laboratory's Fire Rescue Department denies his team was dispatched.
On the night of November 24th, 1992, we did not get called out to any fire off-site. I have copies of my records from that period of time if you'd like to look at them, sir.
Firemen who claim that they were dispatched to the crash site on the night of November 24th say they're afraid to go public with what they know. One apparently has been relocated to another state. Another says he fears for his job and his family. Yet, County Fire Dispatcher Miles Quinn vehemently denies that anyone from his department was dispatched on the night in question. J.B. Michaels, researcher and author of an upcoming book on the Long Island crash, spoke with several firemen who were on site on the night of November 24th.
Several of the people that I talked to were terrified. They weren't just afraid, they were terrified. Whatever crashed is definitely something the government does not want the public to know about.
If it came out that I spoke about this, I would be in a life-threatening situation because it would fall into the realm of national security. And at that point, they have the option of terminating me.
Computer and video expert Jim Delatosa analyzed the video for encounters using a variety of scientific databases.
In spectrum analysis, you burn a material and you look at its chemical composition. There are also databases principally used by firemen. When they arrive at a scene, they can videotape flames and fire, compare it to a database, and know if it's wood or oil or plastic. This is a metal that is burning at high temperature. It didn't fit the normal characteristics of fire that would be in this electro-optical database. I believe it's a very advanced government project that for the safety of the people in the area, the events that happened are masked, or it's an exotic spacecraft.
We may never know what happened on the night of November 24th, 1992. It's possible that further research could lead to a definitive answer. And as far as citizens of Long Island are concerned, the truth will eventually come out.
Congress, executive branch, if you're listening to this message, it's time to stop the cover-up, to tell the people what the government knows and when it knew it about UFO reality.
The videotape we received was allegedly provided by a Defense Department subcontractor. It is an important piece of evidence that seems to substantiate eyewitness reports. When we return, more exclusive videotape documenting a UFO incident in Canada